if you look at leadership success, there are personality traits that tend to correlate with it. One is extroversion. It's not a perfect correlation, and we never know fully about causation, but it's 30% correlated with leadership success. The other one is conscientiousness. Are you disciplined? Do you show up on time? Do you do what you said you would do? Do you keep your desk organized? That's a sign of a conscientious person. That is also 30% correlated with leadership success. The other one is openness. That's interesting. Are you looking for innovation, new ideas, new experiences? That is positively correlated 30% also with leadership success. So those are three traits that at the 30% level, not a perfect correlation, but are going to help you rise in the leadership ladder. There's one that's negatively correlated, which I've had to struggle with, neuroticism. So are you getting really anxious when you don't know the outcome of something? Do you experience stress? I've experienced my share of it. I've learned to handle it, especially with sports psychology, and that's a big part of the book, The Psychology of Leadership, is how you handle your stress. But if you score high neuroticism, I actually have a negative 30% correlation with leadership success. Leadership is stressful. People look at you for direction. You have lots of responsibilities. So it helps to be cool, calm, collected under pressure. But again, there's nuance. None of this is set in stone. What's super important and underappreciated is the team aspect of this.
Speaking about the psychology of leadership, psychology of success, and how you can make it with seemingly very little in this world, I'm speaking to Sébastien Page, who is the Chief Investment Officer currently of
Rowe Price.
Rowe Price. Hi, Sébastien. Welcome. Happy to have you on Grownlearn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm super excited about the discussion today.
You've had a long career in asset management. And it started with an internship, moving to the US without speaking the language. You're French Canadian. How did you raise to the top echelons of asset management?
It took 25 years. So it's hard to summarize a 25-year career, but I can say that I had excellent mentors. I worked very hard. And I prioritized communication, even though I've always been in more technical roles and decision-making roles. So those are the ingredients that helped me. At the end, it wasn't a smooth ride. There were ups and downs. And I also had to learn to deal with stress because our business is unbelievably stressful, money management. And I had to learn resilience. Zorina, the example I like to use is Roger Federer. So Roger Federer went viral about a year and a half ago when he made a commencement speech to students. And as one of the top tennis players of all time, he said, I have won 80% of the 1,500 matches I've played in my career. But then he asked, what percentage of the points do you think I won? And it's remarkably low. It's only 54%. So Roger Federer, one of the top tennis players of all time, lost close to half the points he ever played. Now, the reason why he said that is really important. And it's what he said next to the students that's most interesting. He said, no matter what game you play in life, you're going to lose. Get used to it. And then he said, the best in the world aren't the best in the world because they never lose. They're the best in the world because they know they're going to lose repeatedly, and they've learned to deal with it, adapt and grow. So when you ask me what are the ingredients and how I've climbed the ladder in the corporate world, a lot of it was recognizing that I wasn't going to get every investment decision right, that I wasn't going to get every product development idea right, but that if I could handle the setbacks and learn from them, and as Federer says, adapt and grow, I could keep going.
Mhm. Your book is called The Psychology of Leadership. And I have a friend who used to work in asset management. And she said she actually realized the level of her sensitivity to other people's emotions when she was sitting in a boardroom with potential investors. And after the meetings, they would gather together and they would ask her, so what did you observe? You know, they were asking each other for small clues. So this is when she realized the level of her empathy skills and understanding skills of these soft intuition cues that other people give. Is this coming close to where the idea for the psychology of leadership came from, or is it related?
Well, it's a big part of it. The psychology of leadership covers sports psychology, it covers personality psychology and positive psychology. And it's a list of principles that you can use to build resilience and improve as a leader. I wrote the book to improve myself. I was stressed at work. I got interested in the research. I'm a research nerd. I do research in finance. I started doing research in psychology, reading the scientific literature, working with a PhD sports psychologist as an advisor. And I found so many applications. And yes, Zorina, one of them is the importance of maintaining positive relationships. And in the workplace, that doesn't mean just being nice all the time. It actually means what you just described, giving each other feedback that can be somewhat critical to help each other improve. But you know what? People hate this. They
Mhm.
hate it. It's difficult. If I come to you, Zorina, and I say after the podcast, Zorina, can I give you some feedback? Isn't that threatening? Like
It
the
sounds a bit threatening, yes.
yeah, if someone says that to me, I have like a fight or flight response. Like I have a stress response. Now, there's research that was done by Dr. David Rock. He studied neurology, but also leadership, and he's created this field of neuro leadership, and he's done all these interesting scientific experiments about feedback because he realized it's so crucial for self improvement and for team dynamics, but we all hate it in the workplace. So, what can we do about it? And he looked at people's stress responses when they received feedback. It's huge. Your body responds.
Mhm.
And guess what? The person giving the feedback also has a stress response or stress situation going on because giving feedback can be stressful as well. So the team you describe, I'm going to bet is a high performing team because they figured out how to do this.
The situation was a bit different though, because they were observing the potential clients. So they were looking for cues, nonverbal cues to judge on their next step. So they were not giving each other feedback on their own
Okay.
action. Hmm.
Okay. So that's interesting too. Reading the room
Yeah.
is critical, especially in a sales process. And there are tools for that. And this research is related to that as well. But I think even better if after the meeting they said, how did I do?
Hmm.
And this is the trick. So Dr. David Rock found that when people proactively asked for the feedback, it made a huge difference in their stress response. It made the feedback process way easier. He
Hmm.
had people hooked to monitors, and then they would talk to each other, talk about feedback, and they would just measure how stressed is this person, blood pressure, sweat, heartbeat, all that scientific stuff.
Yeah.
And it's a small thing, right? Just develop the habit to ask for feedback instead of sort of receiving it randomly. And the stress around it is going to be much lower. Now, I also like your idea of reading the room and understanding what you can do to better read people's motivations. Now, this is not nefarious whatsoever. It's
Yes.
actually a way to develop empathy.
Mhm.
This is where personality psychology comes in. And of the three parts in the book, from positive psychology, sports psychology, personality psychology, That was the most interesting. I found that it wrote itself.
Mhm.
If you understand personality psychology, you get much better at reading the room. Is this person an extrovert or an introvert? Is this person more conscientious? How do they rank in terms of openness and neuroticism and agreeableness? Once you start understanding these different traits, first of all, you develop empathy because you understand people better. And I know people in my team that score low in agreeableness, and that's okay. I know they're going to be skeptical if I bring them a new idea. I know their default position is going to say, how could this not work? That's just how they process information. So, in your example, if the team understands where the different personalities in the room are, um, you know, how people respond and how they react under stress, and just eventually just reading the room, that's going to make them their sales process much better. So I'll just say for personality psychology that it's incredibly powerful. I'll also say, Zarina, it's not a perfect science at all.
Mhm.
You cannot go and say, okay, this person's an extrovert. They're going to behave that way in all situations. It's actually quite controversial in the scientific literature how much of people's behaviors and attitude are explained by those personality traits. And
Mhm.
we might have a certain personality trait in certain situations. I might act like an extrovert, but ultimately I'm more of an introvert. And part of it is heritable. You get it from your parents, from your genes. Part of it is learned. It's a squishy science, like a lot of things in asset management. There are no hard answers. But in general, if you can understand those traits, you're going to get much better at what your friend was doing, reading the room.
Yeah. You mentioned measuring the personality type per a few trigger words that reminded me of the Canadian philosopher and psychologist. What was his name? It escaped me right now, the famous one. Are you basing your analysis on his um, s- uh, personality
If
types?
look, it might be talking about Jordan Peterson, might be
Exactly.
talking about
Yeah.
others.
Yeah. Jordan Peterson.
The scientific research behind personality types, especially the so-called Big Five model for personality, has been ongoing for several decades, and
Okay.
it's attributed to multiple researchers. The Big Five is one model. There are other models. People like to use the Myers-Briggs
Mm.
in business. The Big Five is the most researched,
Yeah.
and it's one of those scientific research trends that have captured the attention of many people, many academics, and also in practice. Susan Cain just published a book, not just published, a few years ago, published The Power of Introverts, right, in the workplace. That's bringing personality psychology to the workplace and explaining that, hey, introverts actually make really good leaders once you give them the job. They
Mhm.
have a harder time getting the job because they tend to be more withdrawn or quieter and not be passionate about group work as much. But once they get the job, they're actually great listeners. And that's a huge part of skilled leadership. That's an example of bringing personality psychology to business and high performance teams. I'm going all the way. I'm going with each of the big five traits, defining them, finding applications in business, explaining how they work, and teaching my readers to eventually read others. It's a lot of fun. You can be
Yeah.
sitting in a meeting and you just step back and look around the room and you think through the different personality traits of the different people in the room, and it just helps you understand. It's People might think, oh, is it manipulative, is it nefarious? Not at all. It just helps you understand people and just be more patient with someone who's really not speaking up enough in a meeting. They're probably a deep introvert. That's okay.
Mhm.
Call on them sometimes, they'll be happy.
Mhm.
And so personality, I think, is the route to more empathy, more effective leadership, and ultimately reading the room.
So when we speak about introverts, what is a way to enhance their positive skills and encourage the leadership within to show? What are some ways to deal with introverts?
An example I give in the psychology of leadership is how I run my steering committees. People know that I'm always looking for the so-called 1/n rule. Now, this might sound a little bit technical, but it's super simple. N is the number of people in the meeting. 1/n is what I'm expecting on average the contribution of each member of the team is going to be. So right now there's two of us, N is 2. Now, this is a special situation because you're interviewing me. But if we were having a regular business meeting, my goal over time would be each of us contributes 1/2, 50%. Now, if you have 10 people, you look for people to contribute 10%. It's not a hard rule, but what it means in practice is that if someone dominates the conversation and thinks out loud, I know people like this, and there's nothing wrong with it. I want them to scale it back a little bit towards 1/n. If there's an introvert that doesn't contribute as much, I want them to make a conscious effort to scale up their participation and contribution. And then as the leader, you'd be amazed how we all forget to do this. It's also my responsibility to moderate the discussion in a way that I will call on the introverts. This is one of the principles. Call on the introverts. And you know what? When someone's been quiet for a while in a meeting and they've been listening, usually they're absorbing the information and they're going to have something really thoughtful to say. While extroverts might be spinning their wheels, which there's nothing wrong with that, calling on the introvert or just a quiet person, it's not just introverts versus extroverts, but calling on someone who's been sitting back and listening is going to help you move forward generally. So 1/n. 1/n is one way to get more contribution. And ultimately for introverts, it's really important that they're given the opportunity to do independent work and then bring independent work to the table. This is one of the things Susan Cain said, which is let's stop the madness for group work. I do this in some investment committees. I ask people to think about trade ideas independently and then bring them to the table. That is also proven to reduce groupthink and group biases in decision-making under uncertainty. So it suits the introverts better, you get more out of them, and it helps reduce biases in decision-making.
On this scale, what of introvert versus extrovert, what is your stance, or where do you stand, and can you control the way you act in certain situations? Are you able to observe yourself? What is the way to observe yourself?
One way to observe whether you are an introvert or an extrovert is very simple. Do you get energized if you go to a cocktail party, or is it exhausting for you? I'm oversimplifying, but if it's exhausting for you, you're more likely to be an introvert. I am fundamentally on the introvert side of the scale. And you're right to ask the question that way. It is a scale. It's not one or the other. You know, it's interesting because in some situations, I will be extroverted. I will get energy from being around friends that I've known for a very long time. Then there's much less mental energy required for me. It's more relaxing. There is an actual debate in the scientific literature whether personality is situational or whether it's completely ingrained.
Yeah.
It's interesting research to read. The takeaway is nothing is set in stone. They're general tendencies, but personality is not set in stone. I joke in the psychology of leadership that you want to be careful not to use personality research and personality traits like we use horoscopes. right? You read a horoscope and you say, "Oh, this makes sense. This is me. This is gonna, this is gonna happen today." Or you explain everyone's behavior based on their personality. Oh, of course she will act that way. She's an extrovert, or all extroverts are basically jerks who like to hear themselves talk, and introverts are really nice people. If we only gave them the chance to contribute, they'd take over the world. There's nuance. It's helpful. At the same time, you have to be careful not to take it too far.
I've interviewed a few HR specialists, especially on hiring topics, and they do state that the newest movements in hiring are actually not to so much rely on the past, because indeed performance is situational, as you just mentioned, when it comes to personality expression. It's also linked to performance in different environments. So the type of environment that you're in requires predominantly extrovert people. Is this correct? Or
Yeah,
not necessarily?
I love that question. So if you look at leadership success, there are personality traits that tend to correlate with it. One is extroversion. It's not a perfect correlation, and we never know fully about causation, but it's 30% correlated with leadership success. The other one is conscientiousness. Are you disciplined? Do you show up on time? Do you do what you said you would do? Do you keep your desk organized? That's a sign of a conscientious person. That is also 30% correlated with leadership success. The other one is openness. That's interesting. Are you looking for innovation, new ideas, new experiences? That is positively correlated 30% also with leadership success. So those are three traits that at the 30% level, not a perfect correlation, but are going to help you rise in the leadership ladder. There's one that's negatively correlated, which I've had to struggle with: neuroticism. So are you getting really anxious when you don't know the outcome of something? Do you experience stress? I've experienced my share of it. I've learned to handle it, especially with sports psychology. And that's a big part of the book, The Psychology of Leadership, is how you handle your stress. But if you score high neuroticism, actually have a negative 30% correlation with leadership success. Leadership is stressful. People look at you for direction. You have lots of responsibilities. So it helps to be cool, calm, collected under pressure. But again, there's nuance. None of this is set in stone. What's super important and underappreciated is the team aspect of this. I don't want a team of 5 people to work on a project to all score super high in conscientiousness. Now you might say, why not? They're disciplined, right? You know what's going to happen in that team? They're going to suffer from perfectionism. And in business, you got to get things done. And sometimes you need to wing it, make decisions with limited data. That's going to be hard for a team of 5 when they're all hyper conscientious. I'd rather have someone who's scores lower on conscientiousness in that team to balance it out. Someone who's going to improvise and look for 80-20 solutions. In my own experience, there's a story in The Psychology of Leadership about that. As an introvert, the early years of my career were boosted by collaboration with a salesperson who was an absolute extrovert. What was beautiful was how we worked together. I call him the human piranha on steroid. There's a famous finance book by Michael Lewis where he describes a financial trader as a human piranha because the trader just swears all the time. Zorina, I'm not about to swear on your show, don't worry. But this human piranha in Michael Lewis's book just swears 3 words out of every sentence is a swear word. Well, the human piranha on steroid that I ended up working with had 4 or 5 words were swear words. And the first time I met him, I was supposed to meet him in Texas at a Hertz rental location station. And my admin had given me the wrong address. And so he was running late. He was looking for me. He called me and I got a barrage of swear words, right? This was our first client trip together. Where are you? Aren't you one of the geniuses from the research team? We're running late. Hold on, I'm getting there. This was the beginning of a multi-year collaboration where we built a business together, where I was doing technical work, asset allocation advice for clients, and he was the door opener. And it works so well together. And you see this in a lot of sales situations. A more introverted technical expert and a more extroverted salesperson. And the salesperson talk about the football game. And, I'll talk about regression analysis and statistics and financial markets risk management.
Mm. Leadership is a very broad topic. I mean, you're speaking about it from the perspective of a company leader, but also on the perspective of sports leadership. But when it comes to company leadership, just understanding these different personalities doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to put them together, because as some experts say, hiring is the majority of the work when it comes to building a team. So you're given these a bunch of people that not necessarily fit your ideal um, types to put together a team for a certain purpose. How do you deal with such a situation when you
You're
don't have the
right.
right personality types?
Yeah, it's not as easy as I make it sound, right? It's not like you can score everybody on these personality traits and automatically balance the team. There's so many other considerations, including technical skills, for why you hire certain people in certain roles. It still is going to give you an edge, though, if you can understand people better and on the margin balance the teams better. Ultimately, you need to have a culture of trust and mutual respect. It's not about just being nice, because just being nice, you're going to skip on feedback that could be helpful to help others improve. But as long as there's trust and mutual respect, you're on to something in terms of culture, recruiting. When you recruit someone, a lot of companies will recruit people for maximum high performance. A lot of companies will say, yes, we'll recruit people for maximum high performance, but we're not going to recruit jerks. We're not going to recruit people who individually might provide maximum high performance for what they do, but they're actually going to make the team worse because of the drama.
Mhm.
And so that doesn't work. I had someone once that worked for me earlier in my career, and I was doing their year-end evaluation. And they had done really well on a project that was difficult and that involved breaking some eggs, if you will. It involved driving change across the enterprise. But at the same time, their feedback showed that they weren't really making the team better overall because their collaboration score was really, really, really low. So I'm having this discussion, and the person looks at me and he goes, look, I had to break some eggs. You gave me a mission, and I just had, that's the costs. Poor collaboration scores is the cost of me getting things done for you. And I thought about that a lot because I don't like that trade off. That trade off is a sign of a bad culture. So I went back for him. I looked at all 240 evaluations I'd done, 240 data points. That's like over 10 years of evaluations. And I created a scatter plot of job performance scores and collaboration scores. So if he was right, it should slope downwards. In other words, high performance will cost you on collaboration.
Mhm.
But guess what the plot looked like? It was a strong positive correlation. So people who were performing well also were scoring really high on collaboration.
Mhm.
So I went back to him and I said, look, here's the data. It's not a negative slope. It's a very positive slope. And strong collaboration is part of high performance, no matter what job you have. Some jobs are more individualistic, others are more team related. But at the end, high collaboration scores tend to correlate with high performance scores. That's super important in business. You're not, especially for students, when they get out of school, I often get asked to give advice to students. They're about to enter the workforce. I always tell them, look, if you work hard in school, you get A's. It's your individual merit. Yes, you'll get team projects, but at the end, your GPA is going to be your individual merit. And then I shocked them by quoting a study in psychology that shows that after controlling for grit and personality and other aspects, 1 to 2% of their future success is going to be tied directly to their IQ. And I tell them that once they enter the business world, their contribution to a team is going to be the key factor to their long-term success.
Sebastian, I do have one more question on the sports side of a performance. But before I ask this question, can you tell people where they can find your book that came out in April? And you have two other books. You're a best-selling author, actually.
So the book is everywhere books are sold. Easiest probably to buy it on Amazon. And if people want to find me, I'm on social media. And the best way to find me on social media is on LinkedIn usually.
Mm-hmm. So to write this book, you interviewed a number of high-performing sports people. Can you share one story that stands out of how sports psychology impacted the results or the lives of the people that had changed their psychology?
I'll give you two quick ones. I did not get to interview them directly, but they're great stories. Simone Biles, one of the best gymnasts of all time, famously had issues at the Tokyo Olympics. They call it the twisties, but she was overworked and burnt out and had issues when she was up in the air doing flips, just orienting herself, and actually had to walk out of the Olympics. Oh. How did Simone Biles improve and come back to win medals? She took time to rest. I like to say Simone Biles got better as a gymnast because she started watching Netflix on Sundays. And I think that's a great story of balance. It's not directly sports psychology, although it is, because it was kind of a burnout situation for her and stress and anxiety. The other one I like to use is Felix Baumgartner in 2012 went up in a small capsule tied to a helium balloon, 24 miles. He went to the edge of space. He was just wearing a little like a special suit. And you know what he did, Zorina? He's up in space in a small capsule tied to a balloon. He's just on the edge of space, 24 miles up. Do you know what he did? He jumped.
I know he jumped, but I know he lost consciousness for a few seconds as well.
And that was part of the risk, right? He jumped 24 miles down. He fell for 10 minutes, 4 minutes of which were in free fall. He's the first human being to break the sound barrier without being in an aircraft. What most people don't know about Baumgartner, though, is that constantly through his training and the day of, he was coached by a sports psychologist, Michael Gervais. And to me, this is a great example because it speaks to how we often think of psychology in terms of dealing with clinical issues. Depression, anxiety, super important. And not as often think of psychology in terms of high performance, ultra high performance, doing things like Simone Biles and Felix Baumgartner. And if you start looking into the research, about half the research now in psychology is on the positive side. How do people thrive? How do people reach high performance? How do they do extraordinary things? And in my case of the psychology of leadership, how do people become better leaders?
I am actually in contact with a few people that specifically do sports psychology and psychology for performers, artists and performers, because they also use the same methodologies to perform better. So, yeah,
we have to bring some of this to the workplace, some of these principles to the workplace.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Very interesting conversation. Everybody, the psychology of leadership, everywhere on all possible outlets. Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Thank you.